Riskonet Africa is calling on businesses to establish shared power generation nodes. It says with the power crisis in the country reaching breaking point, businesses need to look beyond generators for solutions. We can speak now to Volker von Widdern, the head of strategic risk practice at Riskonet. A very good evening to you, sir. Grateful for your time. So, how long is the list of options that business has in this worsening power crisis in South Africa currently?
Good evening to you. I don't think the list of options is that long in the immediate sense, but what we were trying to illustrate that when one's trying to resolve a strategic risk, you need to come up with strategic or alternative solutions that are different to what our current dependencies are. The key dependencies are obviously Eskom and through that load shedding. And if you asked a business whether they were considering significant levels of alternative diesel and or otherwise power, there are usually particular feasibility constraints around efficiency, cost, capital expenditure and the like. However, when you look at the larger power banks and moderating power based on offtake, and you look at the enormous variability of efficiency of diesel engines when they are generating power and inefficiency, which is the challenge, because power is not always drawn off at the same time. When you then have power balancing across a couple of users in a similar node, and you have the efficiency of scale across that maybe city block or industrial block, the alternatives become a lot more viable. When you're considering increases in tariffs of 10 or 15 or 20% per annum, those alternatives look very attractive over 3 or 5 years. And so the issue is rather have parallel power generation and less impact of load shedding. The second key factor is the upside of having much lower power load shedding and running longer production runs in a factory that requires continuous power is enormously beneficial compared to starting and stopping factories with work in progress and production lines that can't be stopped.
We've got now AfriForum speaking about the possible creation or development of its own nuclear pebble bed reactor. Is that a viable solution, a viable alternative?
Well, I'm not the nuclear expert, but certainly it's much more viable in the containerized nuclear concept that they're advocating because it's smaller, it takes a lot less money and time, and can be located immediately where the power requirement is there, and it has a much lower water and environmental footprint. So from that viability point of view, it sounds very much more attractive than significant coastal nuclear with all its attendant complexities. And if you take that version, and I heard earlier that we're talking about 5 years' time, 27, if we bring in a blend of gas and industrialized diesel to get us over the immediate emergency, lift industrial capacity to a more efficient and reliable level, and then survive on Eskom running at perhaps 15,000 megawatts, which is what they can reliably produce, then you've got in 5 years' time significant other capacity coming on stream. That gives you an immediate, medium and long-term solution that is a well-designed structure. At the moment, we're simply trying to force more money and maintenance into one model which has very high dependencies and risks associated with it.
At a legislative level, is there more room for government to maneuver, to open up, to allow businesses and other people to explore alternative energy sources?
Well, yes, we have part of that solution now, which we hope is, therefore, we're pushing against an open door. If there's unrestricted internal development by corporates, the only next thing is to share that unrestricted development with your neighbors in a suburb or an industrial node. And in that way, you can then take a lot of the high capacity demands off the Eskom power, and then our load shedding is actually a lot easier to manage because the peaks of the demand are then a lot more regulated. So it should be a relatively easy thing to achieve in terms of regulation. And, in terms of our recent press release by the President, who said, let's solve this together, I don't believe it's together only with Eskom. It should be together with a multifaceted approach with industry and corporates generating their power, sharing and managing their power generation in their local nodes.
Let me ask you a more long-term question then, Volker. Would it make more sense for South Africa going into the future to have a private power generation company exist side by side with Eskom, where people who want to still remain on the grid with Eskom do that, but also we've got the option to buy power elsewhere?
Yes, and the answer is multiple private power companies which auction their power and are tested for efficiency and are in a competitive environment where they're auctioning their power at a particular price. So you don't have an IPP bid where you have one auction that lasts for 20 years. You can have an auction every week or every month when you've got multiple power companies auctioning their power into industrial nodes and the like, and then you can switch in and switch out as you wish. Obviously, that requires some transmission management and so forth. But that is a much more efficient model, and it massively reduces the risk because your dependencies are so much lower.
Volker von Widdern, good to have your time. Thank you.